You're listening to the MLCC On the Road podcast, brought to you by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, with hosts Sarah Weber and David Marvin. Welcome back to the MLCC On the Road podcast. I'm David Marvin, and I have a guest host today, Erica Hoppus. Hello, Erica. How are you doing today?
Hi, David. I am doing great. Thank you very much.
And we are at the Michigan Beer and Wine Wholesalers Association in Traverse City today. And we have some special guests that we are going to interview. But before we get started, I want to hand off one of the introductions to Cora Nevins, and she can introduce one of our special guests.
One of our special guests today will be Spencer Nevins, the president of MB&WWA.
Spencer, would you introduce our other special guest?
Yes, happy to introduce our other guest. Our other guest today is Joanie O'Sullivan-Butler, who is the owner, president, and CEO of John P. O'Sullivan Distributing in Grand Blanc Township. And I'm also happy to say she's our current chairperson of our board of directors. She's served on our board for 14 years, and we represent 42 distributors and their 5,000 employees across the state of Michigan.
Thank you for joining us, Spencer and Joanie. Can you just tell us a little bit about the organizations that you are representing today?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm excited to be here. So I'm the president and owner of John P. O'Sullivan Distributing. We're primarily a Molson Coors distributor, and we cover 11 counties in mid-Michigan, Genesee, Lapeer, Owasso. We go up to Saginaw, Bay City, and Midland, and then we cover the Thumb, so Port Huron as well.
Quite a large footprint there.
Yes.
Now, has it always been that, or have you grown over the years?
We've grown over the years. So we started back in 1976. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. And when we started, we were two counties, Genesee and Lapeer, and we pretty much had two brands, Stroh's out of Detroit and then Miller.
How many employees do you have right now at JP O'Sullivan?
So we kind of fluctuate. Right now we're about 140. In the summer we have more because of we have all the college kids come home and help build displays and stack shelves and everything out in the big stores. In the winter it's closer to 130.
How has that number grown since, with your growth up to 11 counties, how has that impacted your employment numbers?
It's definitely, we've grown over the years, not only with the larger territory, but just with the amount of brands and different types of beverages we carry. We've actually moved to a larger warehouse 2 years ago. We were in the original building my dad built in 1980 in Flint Township. So we had to finally say, okay, we're done here. We're landlocked, and we moved. And then when we moved, that also our employee base grew as well because we had more space.
You mentioned that this is your 50th anniversary. Are there any interesting stories that you can tell about the past 50 years? Anything really cool that's happened, or any really interesting things that you would like people to know about that growth over those years?
Right now, we're doing our first social media campaign, and it centers around this 50 stories for 50 years. We've started just putting a lot of our company history on our Instagram and our Facebook. And I mean, one of my favorite stories is that my dad and his partner, Mike Sullivan, so it was John O'Sullivan and Mike Sullivan. We were originally Sullivan and O'Sullivan Distributing. They started January 1st, 1976. Pretty much my dad actually worked at Stroh's. He started taking out the tours in college and worked his way up and ended up calling on the Flint distributor, which was Moyer Beverage at the time. They wanted to get out of the business, and they sold to Mike and my dad. And so when they bought the beer distributorship, it was primarily Stroh's was the big beer. And then in 1975, that was when Miller Lite was invented. And 1976, it came to the market. So that changed the whole landscape of beer nationally. They really jumped from just a small little two-county distributorship. With the popularity of Miller Lite, things really exploded. So it was really just lucky timing. That's always just a great story to me. They got all of the beer at that time on rail cars, and they couldn't unload them fast enough. So they were paying the demurrage on the fines and everything to get everything, unloaded. It was just such a crazy time in the beer industry because that really changed everything.
And you mentioned this social media campaign. Where can people go and find that information to hear these stories that you're going to be telling?
We have O'Sullivan Distributing on Instagram, and then we also have Facebook. So on both of those, we're posting.
Joanie, if I was looking for you on Instagram or Facebook, how would I find you?
So on Instagram, we are at O'Sullivan Distributing, and on Facebook, we are at John P. O'Sullivan Distributing.
And we will put links to both of those in the description of our podcast.
So Cora, as a child who, has a parent in the industry, do you have any questions for Joanie? Because at one point, Joanie was also a child whose father was very deeply embedded in this industry.
What made you decide to follow his footsteps?
It's a good question. So I always grew up in the industry, grew up, working at the warehouse as a kid all the way through high school and then college. And so just kind of always felt that I was going to come back and be part of the business. It was family business. I'm an only child, so it was, kind of all on me. So I always expected to come back and do it. I always thought it was a fun business. Was coming to these conventions at your age and got to know everybody, and it's been a great business.
So, Joanie, the MLCC has also seen a predominant growth in leadership, as far as women are concerned. How do you feel about the number of women that are now taking on different roles and leadership roles within the beer industry?
It's definitely increased and grown since I started in the industry. I remember starting out full-time in about 2005, and there were a lot less. I kind of stuck out at some of these conventions and different things, but now we have a lot of women in many different roles, even on the supplier side and both on the distributor side. We have 2 distributorships in Michigan that are owned by women. We have myself and then Kit and Jamie Wanty at O&W. So that's really nice. And we also have even grown as part of Michigan Beer and Wine. We have a women's advocacy committee. We bring all of the women from the MLCC and have an event. And then we also bring in the women in the legislature and just kind of talk to them and show them our headquarters and really inform them about what our industry is all about. So it's been really positive, a lot of positive growth, both on the supplier and distributor end. And then even on the national side, our National Beer Wholesalers Association started out for women in the industry, and they've started doing different conferences at both of their national conventions and bring in speakers. And it's open to everyone to come to these conferences, but it kind of has a women-focused group. And I'm on the advocacy board for that. So that's been really fun. I've gotten to meet other women owners in the industry throughout the country. So this has kind of opened up a lot of doors as far as that. It's been really nice.
That's awesome. Thank you for paving the way for women.
Spencer, what is the association's role in the beverage alcohol industry in Michigan?
We're a trade association, so we represent 42 local family-owned distributors, all located in Michigan. And our role is to really advocate for them and advocate for the industry, to make sure there's laws that recognize the contributions they make to the state of Michigan, make sure there is a business environment in Michigan that's sustainable, that creates competition, also protects public health and safety. So that's a lot of our role. So we're in front of the Liquor Control Commission quite a bit. We're obviously in front of the legislature. We get involved in the courts as well. So we're an advocacy organization, and we advocate for the industry.
And you touched on the safety aspect, and that was one of the questions I wanted to ask is, how do you see Michigan's 3-tier system where we have separate suppliers and wholesalers and retailers? How do you see that benefits the consumers and then also protects the general public here in Michigan?
So we'll just start, after Prohibition, and people were looking at how do we avoid some of the problems we had before that. Really, you had basically monopolistic ownership structures where the supplier owned everything. And there was a lot of overfocus on consumption. And so the idea coming out was, do you create a system? And they came up with 2, right? A controlled state system, which we have here where the state sells spirits, or a licensing system called the 3-tier system where you have private businesses and they're licensed. And the idea is you separate these tiers so that the suppliers can focus on selling to, that's the top tier, sell to the distributors or wholesalers, terms interchangeable. That's the middle tier, who then sell to the retailers. And you can separate that retailer from that supplier with an entity that's located in the state of Michigan, that distributor that you can regulate through. The commission can regulate through, check on product, check on records, get excise tax collection. So that's the system. But the system has tremendous benefits in terms of controlling consumption. It also, though, creates a ton of competition because that supplier has rules on what it can do with the distributor. Distributor and supplier have rules on what they can do with the retailer, and vice versa, which really prevents anyone from controlling somebody else. And without someone controlling, for example, Joanie and her business, she can choose what brands that she wants to bring to market. She has unlimited choice, and a supplier can't prevent her from doing that. And that has created a lot of competition. There's no other industry in the United States, I challenge you to find one, and you won't, that has more producers making product in competing to get their product on shelves every day.
You mentioned the competition and suppliers not being able to dictate to wholesalers. That comes under what we refer to colloquially as the franchise laws. How do you see that those franchise laws benefit the consumers also, and how do they actually help businesses like wholesalers, the family business that you're talking about here, to be able to succeed? And is there an impact on what products may or may not be in the industry because of those franchise laws?
The 3-tier system creates independence, right? That's probably the best way to put it. Between the tiers, the franchise law takes that a step farther to ensure that distributor is independent from the supplier. So a supplier has to give a distributor an agreement. They have to spell out the core components of how they're going to go to market every day, how they're going to operate. But there's limitations on what they can do. And so they can't control what brands a distributor carries. They can't control the distributor's employees. They can't force the distributors to take on unordered product. There's a lot of things. We also have the Distributor Independence Act in Michigan that plays a big role in that. But the best way to demonstrate how it helps consumers is to tell a story, but I'm going to whitewash names. So large multinational supplier in the 80s is in one of our distributors' warehouses doing a visit, making sure that distributors in compliance, and they notice a really nice new brand that many people enjoy today, comes from Canada, and they mention it like, oh, wow, see, you got this brand. And the distributor says, yeah, it's a good brand. And end of the day, the meetings are all done. They're sitting in the meeting, and that supplier looked at that distributor and said, let me explain something to you today. By the time I walk out your front door, that stuff better, that new brand better be poured in the parking lot, or you won't be carrying our brand anymore. And that's the way a lot of industry works. That's the way the soft drink industry works, the peanut butter industry. It doesn't matter. The cereal industry. If you're a distributor, you're at their mercy. That big economic power, right? Whoever's got the economic power. In our industry, that doesn't happen. So I like to say that our franchise law and our system, we are actually better than the Sherman Antitrust Act. The Sherman Antitrust Act waits until all the harm's happened and people are driven out of business. We prevent it all on the front end. We prevent it all. Everyone gets access to the market, which then gives the consumer a lot of choice. I mean, you don't walk into any restaurant and say, when they say, can I get you something to drink? First question, Coke or Pepsi? You don't ask that. You don't say Miller or Anheuser-Busch, or doggone well. You say, can I see your menu? Because you're about ready to look at a ton of choice. And sometimes you're sitting there and you're staring for a while because there's such a great list of options to choose from.
Spencer, I actually have a question for you. How do you juggle family time with work? Because you work from 8 to 6 sometimes.
I work in an industry where family-owned businesses, that's who you deal with every single day. Joanie alluded to it earlier. Her dad started the business and she worked in the business and she came up in the business. And so everyone I work for, they are families. They understand that need to balance the job. And yes, in my role, I'm on 24/7, but the members also understand I have to have family time, and they're great at making sure I get it, just like they've done as well. It's a balance. So, we make it to your volleyball games and your basketball games and everything else you've got going, while we still get out to see the kids who are in college, but we also get the work done. And you just sometimes don't work normal hours.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of cool, though, to come to some of these events and see how family-oriented these organizations and these businesses really are. And I think that the fact that we were able to bring Cora in today, it speaks to how embedded family really is in the industry. And I mean, for me, that is it's such a cool thing.
What I find interesting as the president of the association, what I learned, and I've been here 20 years now, is the conventions are very important for lots of reasons. One, it brings everyone together and they can talk about best practices, just catch up, not in the competitive environment where they're all competing out in the marketplace. We come together, we have our meetings, it's great. But what gets lost, I think, sometimes is the kids who are showing up there today and making friendships, and they don't care if this person's dad is an AB distributor, or this person's mom and dad are a Molson Coors, a Miller, whatever. They don't care. They just become friends. And what that means is then when they're adults and they are competitors, they're also friends. And that's, I think, one of the secret successes to our association is people become friends when they're children at these events. And it's really hard when you're a competitor to not also still remember the friendship. And I think it helps us when we come into the boardroom and we're trying to make decisions that are best for everybody. Those friendships prevail oftentimes over the competitiveness.
So, Joanie, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the industry, and what are you expecting here in the next year, 5 years, and down the road?
The industry has changed so much over the years from just going to more of like domestic light beer, and then you had the big wave of craft beers, and then now it's moved on to there was the big seltzer craze with White Claw and Truly, and now the big craze are ready to drink beverages, so ready to drink cocktails. And some of these are like that are popular in Michigan are like the long drink or carbless, Surfside, Cutwater. These just, I think that consumer tastes have changed over the years, and people want, more sweeter, interesting flavors. And especially like the younger generation that grew up on energy drinks or Prime or all of these things, they want flavor to their beverages. So these drinks have really taken off over the years, and I see that continuing that trend. And then more and more beer distributors are also going into like non-alcoholic beverages. We are a prime distributor. We used to carry Alani before it got bought out by Pepsi. We continue to look for what functional beverages are coming into the market. We just picked up one called Recess, which has ashwagandha, and one can calm you, one can give you energy. And I think that all of these trends, like the wellness trend, is filtering down to beverages. And I think that will continue over the next couple of years.
So, Joanie, you mentioned that you have about 130 employees, and I know statewide, Spencer, you mentioned about 5,000 employees. I think a lot of people, when they think about alcohol products, they think of their favorite brands, and that's more of the supplier tier, and where you buy them, that's more of the retailer tier. But there's this wholesaler tier, you guys right in the middle, that the average person that consumer doesn't know what you guys do and the impact that you have on their communities, and with the number of people that you employ and the different things you do for community involvement. What do you see your impact as a wholesaler is in your community and statewide, the association and the members that are involved in all their communities?
So definitely, I feel that the wholesaler tier and the distributors as a whole are very involved in their local communities. I mean, they're very involved in charities, but also we put on a lot of events. We participate in festivals. And like, for example, in the Flint area, we sponsor the Crim Festival of Races, which I think they're coming up on their 50th next year. It has a major charitable impact. We're the beer sponsor for that. So we're very involved in local events, church festivals, local concerts. And I know that all of the distributors throughout the state are involved in those types of events. We're always promoting like our community, charitable communities. We're involved not only like with those type of like more like statewide events with our local church festivals or other events, silent auctions, things like that. I would say that the wholesale tier as a whole is very, very involved in the communities. And then, we're about a mid-sized distributor. So you have other distributors that are employing, 500 employees, and that has a huge impact on communities. Many of them put together scholarship funds. I know there's a wide range of things that other distributors do throughout the state as well.
This is one of the things that makes it great to represent this industry. Local food pantries. I know when Flint had its water crisis, donating the water, we have distributors in Michigan who have donated to California wildfires. It's really just they step up where their community needs it. Park needs to be rebuilt. Distributors rebuild parks all the time. So they're very, very active. They what does their community need? What does their community next door need? And they help each other out and they help communities. It's one of the big things. The other area, Dave, where you see distributors every day but you don't know it. First of all, that product gets brought into Michigan. The distributors are responsible for getting it here, putting it in their warehouses, keeping it cold, keeping it temperature controlled, whatever it may be. They're also then responsible for getting it on the vehicles, but they're also responsible for doing the sales. They're responsible for doing the marketing, They build those brands. So when a consumer goes out and they walk into a store and they see point of sale, advertising, that's a distributor. You're seeing a distributor when you see point of sale. You're doing a distributor when you're seeing stocked shelves and rotated products. You're seeing a distributor. They do everything from the second it hits Michigan until the second it gets on that retailer shelves. And oftentimes while it's sitting on that retailer shelves, you walk into your local Meijer or Costco, Kroger, whatever it may be, and you see those awesome displays around holidays. Yeah, those are the distributors. That's your distributor in action, building all those brands.
Cora and Joanie and Spencer and my special guest host, Erica, thank you for joining us today on the MLCC On the Road podcast. We hope to talk to you again soon. And for anybody who's listening, we hope that you tune in again to another one of our episodes. Have a good day. The MLCC On the Road podcast is brought to you by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. For more information on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, please visit our website at www.michigan.gov/LCC. Thank you for listening.